I think most pregnant women continue to have sex. And actually, some pregnant women are told that the way to make the baby come, like when they are overdue, is to
Yeah,
have
I've
sex.
been told that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just like a couple one night stands right in there at the end.
Oh, it's a possibility. We'll see. Welcome to Don't Think Twice. VJ and Stevens is the writing and producing duo of Amrita, VJ, and Andrew Stevens. Best friends, business partners, creative partners, and now soon to be co-parents. Dating, sex, and romance. This is probably the source of the most curiosity surrounding our choice to raise children together. Luckily, our host Marina is back in the saddle to help us consider some of these questions and puts her professional therapy training to use in holding us accountable to ourselves and to one another.
Let's talk about romance and dating. Andrew, what does romance and dating look like for you?
What does it look like?
And I think specifically, does the incipient arrival of your child have any impact on that?
Right now, dating and romance look very much like they always have for me, or at least they have for the past 15 years in New York for me. What's been interesting is that there have been two situations that I've been dating someone, one or two dates, and on the second date, I've decided to divulge the information. And both times, I've been surprised. I received a positive response. One, excited by the idea for me, and two, excited, shockingly, by the idea of dating someone who's going to have a child, and further conversation revealing that they're excited by the idea that if our relationship went further, they could be an active participant in a child's life or children's lives.
So why do you think that surprised you?
Because I assumed that a child would just be a barrier, and that a lot of men would just not want to think, especially so early in the dating process. You go on two dates and someone tells you they're about to have a child. That's a lot to think about.
I think it's really important to notice that you feel like becoming a parent is really healing for you and really positive for you in some way, because as we've discussed, it feels like a reparation of your lack of positive paternal experience. And you have such low expectations for men in your life around their interest in supporting that for you. I think that's interesting.
I was definitely shocked about the reactions from both of them. And I did assume that that the average man I would date would not want to be engaged in such a complicated scenario.
So for you, it sounds like you assumed that this step was going to diminish your romantic prospects.
Absolutely. But I had no fear about that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm in a much different position than either a heterosexual man or a woman, in that I occupy a world that has often historically had to think bigger, more broadly about what family means, and can think more creatively about what an individual life can look like, a happy life can look like. Gay men have done that for a long time. I could observe anecdotally in the community as gay marriage became legal, there also seems to be a shift towards a heteronormative assumption of what a real relationship is. Men getting together and having children, all that's great. But the queer family has always been made up in a different way. To your question, I did think it would narrow my dating pool, but I didn't think that pool was very shallow. And I thought that it would only weed out people who I probably wouldn't want to date anyway. And I haven't to this point had any fear and anxiety around what might happen in my romantic life once I become a dad. I haven't once been worried about that.
And I think what I'm hearing as well is that you underestimated the appeal of a chosen family participation. That
Absolutely.
A lot of people are really excited to be like, oh, you're making a chosen family. I want to be part of that.
Yep. I underestimated that and that it wouldn't be really hard to explain. I assumed it would be I would have to do a lot of explanation. And both of these scenarios I had to do next to none.
That's so interesting to me.
And in fact, in both of these situations, the only explanation I had to do was around, the only questions I got were around, well, how involved would you like your partner, meaning the person I'm dating, how involved did you like that person to be in the children's life? And both of the men who were asking it were asking it because they want to be involved. And for them, it would have been a no-go for them if the answer would have been like, I want to keep this completely separate.
Do you think that has something to do also with our age at this point?
Age is a factor. I would imagine. I was told by one of them that he's always wanted children, and he's always known he's wanted children, but he's not in a profession that allows him to afford any of those avenues that cost so much money if you're going to do it through a fertility clinic, even if you're going to do it through adoption.
So what I'm seeing here is the field of dreams effect. If you build it, they will come. Like when you start your chosen family, the people who you're dating, will show up and be like, hey, I would love to be a
Tell me
uncle.
more. Yeah. That was the reaction. Tell me more. Can I be involved? And to the age point, both of these men were in their 30s in a way that felt like a second or third, fourth date conversation about these things was not awkward, didn't feel too soon.
So what does your ideal scenario look like, if you have one?
From where I sit right now, my ideal scenario to have a long-term person in my life. It's hard for me to use the word partner because I feel like I already have a partner. And it's just occurring to me now how that doesn't feel that comfortable to say, a long-term romantic partner. But those are just words.
Well, they're important words. What comes up for you when you hear that word partner?
Yeah, it's singularity. The way we use it to refer to romantic couplings or couplings at all. People say my partner, and they usually mean one person. So I think that's what I'm reacting to. I'm thinking about this now, what I want romantically. I could say I want a long-term partner, but I just want it to be known that is not a replacement for my relationship with Amrita. I'm not looking to change the dynamic of my relationship with Amrita at all.
And you're protecting that dynamic.
Right. So, I'd like to have a long-term romantic person in my life. I'm open to them being, us us cohabitating, us, looking in a lot of ways just like a traditional romantic coupling. But that is not something that's a necessity for me. I'm also open to have a romantic partnership that lives in a different place, lives in a different city. All these variations I'm open to. I would not want a romantic partner who wasn't willing to be involved in my full life. I don't think I'm that interested in separating that out, keeping it siloed. I don't have an interest in my romantic partner necessarily being another parent, but maybe I do.
That's okay to not be sure.
Is there a feeling of obligation to Amrita because she has more like literal skin in the game in terms of the amount of physical carrying of the baby that she's doing?
I'm feeling unsure of how everything I want in my romantic life and my broader life can come together in a way that works for everyone, but has to first work for me, not to sound selfish. But so, yeah, I have a fear that there will be times where it doesn't all work easily.
I think that it's really important to put your own oxygen mask on
Oh,
first
yeah,
in
absolutely.
relationships. And it's not selfishness, because if you're only doing it in ways that serve other people, it's not sustainable.
And I have a fear about, this is, I'm just going to be honest. I have a fear of a scenario where I might be in a happy romantic relationship, and Amrita is not. The emotion she might have around that, whatever negative feeling she had about it.
Yeah, I think part of like projecting into the future involves taking one another's feelings into consideration in a way that we wouldn't have.
And in that way, it feels like this relationship becomes doubly queer,
Mm.
right? Like this relationship is queer because it's queering the family. It's queering the narrative of family that we're sold in our culture, right? And it also feels queer in that it's potentially a polyamorous partnership, right? In the sense that your platonic love for each other is very real and important, and doors are open for exploration of other kinds of connections as long as they don't endanger that primary connection.
Right.
I haven't really thought about it that way. And I don't know that I feel that like that I would need to have an independent relationship with your partner, with your romantic partner. But there would have to be a good rapport of some kind, you know? It would need to be that we got along.
And it would need to be that you felt safe with the idea that, like, should the child be with Andrew and partner, that if Andrew goes to the bathroom and partner is just like watching child, you know.
That we trust that person.
Right. Yeah.
And on the flip side, I feel a certain level of nervousness about dating someone who has any feelings about the closeness of my relationship with Amrita. I don't know how far I would date someone before really recognizing that in them. And what I mean is that, I was on a walk. I'll just maybe try to explain myself in this way.
Yes.
And I love a front porch. And I love the vision of me on a front porch and my kids on a front porch. Maybe this is a very Southern thing.
It is.
I think it's also just like in our neighborhood thing. There are people who have a porch lifestyle.
Love
especially
sitting
in
on
the
a
summer.
porch. Love
Yeah.
people walking by, saying hi to people, having my drink. And I was thinking about, Amrita and like us being parents and sitting on the porch. And I was like, that's such a nice vision of mine, of us sitting on the porch and like kids around or kids playing or coming home from school, whatever. And then I thought, if I have a romantic partner, am I always going to have to be sitting next to the romantic partner? I don't want to always have to sit next to the person I'm dating. If the person I'm dating or I'm with long term, comes on the porch and Amrita and I are sitting on the swing, and, I know this is such a silly story to use to try to explain my point, but if that person comes and we're doing our thing, I don't want to feel like, oh, now this person's here and now I have to do something different.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with that story for a couple of reasons. The first one is, I think it so beautifully illustrates the type of proximity that you want to be able to have to different people. And I think that there is a degree to which possessiveness and monogamy become united in our culture in ways that can be unhealthy, right? We need to acknowledge that we're not just individuals in a vacuum. We're also people in community, right? And it's really healthy for us to have like connections beyond our partners. It's actually really unhealthy for our partners to want to have that kind of possessive, dynamic with us over our entire person. And yeah, like even if you weren't in this situation, I would want you to be able to sit next to people who are not your partner.
Well, and for the record, I've never dated anyone who is remotely like that.
But so I'm hearing that you imagine the ideal scenario is a flexible person who's able to show up for you, but also doesn't feel threatened by your relationship with Amrita.
And is able to articulate the things that he needs. I do want to be a partner who's strong enough to say that works for me and that doesn't work for me. And then we can take it from there.
Did you ever envision having a child with a romantic partner?
No. Yes.
Interesting reversal. Tell us more about that.
I never envisioned myself having a child with a romantic partner without Amrita being involved. And then I'm thinking before I met you or before no. So the answer is yes and no. No and yes.
This is so interesting. Tell me more.
Having a child with a romantic partner, yes. Having a child with just a romantic partner, no. I try to imagine a person that I would want to do that with, and I don't think they exist. That's something that just doesn't interest me.
Why?
This really closed, very closed loop. The idea of raising children and going to bed in the same bed with the person who you're raising the children with, every logistical nightmare, every dirty diaper, every electricity bill. Then you're supposed to go to bed with them. You're supposed to get 4 hours of sleep. And then the next night you're supposed to like kiss them on the face and like potentially do romantic things. That's a nightmare for me.
For me, the answer to this question is identical. Like to me, it's like the idea. I don't even understand how people do it. I mean, I know that most people do it this way, but it boggles my mind that people are able to deal with the discomfort, the work, the grossness, the logistics, like all the, sometimes backbreaking labor of raising children together, and then they have to get in the same bed, and then like are expected to have like a sexual relationship with each other on top of all that, like on top of all the like household logistics and childhood. Like it's a lot to place that much onus on one person to be that everything to you. It's not a surprise to me that people like struggle, the marriages struggle a lot when kids are introduced into the picture, because of course they do. I mean, it's so much. And like, that's part of the theme of like what makes this a good setup is like that this can be something that we do together. And then I don't have to have any of those expectations for my romantic partner. That person is like, that's all icing. That can be more of the fun stuff and less of the drudgery. I mean, not that I'm saving drudgery for you.
But that's a beautiful idea, right? And it's also a kind of disaggregation or disintegration of these ideas that one person has to be everything for you, that you and your nuclear family of however many, it's you against the world, right? Like it's actually like bringing in a much broader scope, a much more communal scope of who's involved in your life, who's involved in your child's life, which most Americans experience, right? Like we all relate to The Office because we all have a community. And from the beginning, you're saying you felt this way for a long time, both of you, and Amrita, we're definitely going to backtrack and get there. But is there a point where you remember having that thought for the first time? Was it at some point after y'all had met, or was that something you'd always wanted?
I hadn't had enough romantic relationships to understand what I need in them and what I want in them and what I don't want in them. And so that had to develop first, my understanding of what I liked in my romantic relationships and what was harder for me in order to envision a future where, wow, this person and I would be doing all of these things and we would be so close together. It was only when I had enough romantic relationships and enough insight into myself and enough time to reflect and realize I don't need to be comfortable in something I'm not comfortable in. And I came to the conclusion that I don't want that nuclear family setup because it just doesn't work for me as a personality, which is not to say that there couldn't be a traditional setup that decides not to live in that traditional way. Two people could get together and say, we're not going to sleep in the same bed. We're not going to talk about
have an open relationship or any number of things.
Not everything needs to be exploded in order to redefine what the roles are and the expectations are and all of those things. If I did have a family with a romantic partner, even in a traditional way, there would have to be things that we were doing in a non-traditional way.
Yeah, and I think, that is more the baseline in gay world than it is in straight
Yes.
world, is that you start with fewer assumptions about what the makeup of a nuclear family is. So even if you were to have pursued it with a partner, presumably there would have been some conversation about it, how it might look. There's certainly more traditional nuclear setups where people do re-examine what that means, and there aren't as many assumptions made, but maybe more so on the queer end of the spectrum than on the straight end of the spectrum.
Yeah. So Amrita, let's talk about you and romance and dating.
Yes.
What does that look like in the past for you?
I have not been dating right now. And I have not been dating while pregnant at all. I have had less romantic experience, like in even pre-pregnancy. I have not had the experience of being in a serious romantic relationship. Going off of what Andrew was saying about, like, having at a certain point accumulated enough experience to know, like, what do you want in the future? What do you not want in the future? To some extent, I don't feel that I've accumulated that kind of experience.
So in the past, you felt like you haven't had serious relationships, and right now this is off the table. Do you have feelings about dating being off the table right now?
Yes, and it's actually really surprised me a lot how kind of top of mind the subject has been for me during the pregnancy, because I think there's something about removing the possibility. Like, it felt like logistically impossible right now. It's not actually logistically impossible, but removing it from the table made me fixate on it in a really intense way. And I felt like, okay, I've really figured things out. I've come to terms of acceptance of the paths that I didn't take in the past. But now that I'm in a position where I've removed even the possibility, I was like, oh shit, I really do want to experience that thing.
Well, it's a clarifying move, right? For some people, that might have meant it was a relief. There was less, concern about seeking this kind of external validation that is elusive for all of us at times, right? But I think it's really telling that that's something that you ultimately want, and hopefully will be useful information for you in terms of your future priorities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it surprised me a lot how much thought I've put into it since being pregnant. It's clarifying. It's clarifying to understand, okay, well, clearly that's something that is important to me. So it's something that I can prioritize in a different way in the future.
Do you have moments where you think about this choice to be pregnant and regret that this is a time where you can't be dating?
No, I don't think so. I had to have the removal of that option in order to understand that it was important. It's like that thing where you live down the street from the really cool bar, and then you think I can always go to that bar, and then you end up never going to that bar in the 6 years you live in that apartment. Then you move away and you're like, shit, how come I never hung out there?
Do you have a sense of why you might have avoided pursuing that more actively?
I don't. I don't have a good answer to that. I'm sure there are many reasons.
I would just say before we move on, that we often avoid that bar because it's also a place where people get hurt. And when we are just having casual, fun, no strings attached situations which don't have expectations, that's less likely to happen. And when we're actively just going for romance, it is much more likely that we will get hurt.
Yeah, totally. Definitely some of those reasons are the old classic favorites of, wanting to avoid rejection, self-esteem, all those things,
And what do you hope your ideal scenario will look like in this chosen family? I
would echo a little bit of what Andrew said, but clarify even more that the introduction of a romantic partner would have to be someone who is not just tolerant of this arrangement, but like really enthusiastic about it. So it would have to be someone that didn't need to be coddled about the relationship that you and I have, Andrew, but would be excited to be part of sort of just excited to be part of something different. Do I need it to be the same person in a long-term capacity? That I don't know. Like, I feel like for me, I am seduced by the idea of having, maybe many romances throughout, that might not be just like one person for a long haul. And that person could either be single or could be in a relationship or could be married and in an open marriage, obviously. But part of the reason I'm drawn to that idea is because for the same kind of reasons that Andrew was saying, someone who has a fully formed life of their own, someone who's not looking to either be the missing puzzle piece into something or is not looking for me to be the missing puzzle piece in their family structure. So in some ways, it's very easy to envision that as being someone who maybe has their own family already, has their own kids, that doesn't need me to be a step parent to those children, that maybe actually has a spouse and is like, has sort of that more like that polyamorous sort of a mindset towards having maybe multiple different relationships in their life.
But do you see these as being intimate relationships, not beyond like a sexual capacity?
Yes.
And the reason I ask is because it can feel like it's constructing a scenario where you can avoid rejection. Because I love everything you said, and that's possible, but I would hate to see you choose those relationships in places in order to prevent yourself from fully leaning into something.
Yeah, no, I hear that. But yes, I think I ideally would want that to involve a emotional intimacy as well as like a sexual intimacy.
First of all, I just want to really emphasize the point that Andrew just made, that it is so important for us to support you in going to that bar, because Andrew has built this habit and this practice of going to that bar and being comfortable. At times it doesn't work out. I'm actually really impressed, Andrew, by how many ex-boyfriends are part of our chosen family. So it does also work out really well sometimes when it doesn't stick. But I think, for you, Amrita, like, I'm hearing really clearly that this is a goal for you. Mm-hmm. And you're a beautiful, brilliant person.
She drinks wine while Marina is saying that.
Yeah, she's just avoiding this as much as possible. But I think that it's so difficult for us to internalize that and feel that without a practice of that. And it can feel like, well, we haven't done it and we haven't shown ourselves that it's possible. So maybe it's not going to be possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think there's some degree to which we have to acknowledge that it is different in straight world. And as someone who does date men, that it is a different pool. And
unfortunately,
with that said, I don't also want to go in with the defeatist mindset that it is impossible, that is completely impossible. But there is some realism there that it is going to be more difficult for me than it is for you, Andrew. And that's just, that's true. Like before we had a family, like before we have kids, after we have kids, in some ways, I don't know, actually, it might even be like easier, because like, as we get older, there are going to be more people in the dating pool, just age wise, that might have gone through divorces,
many experiences, had
many different experiences, might have children, might not be turned off by the idea of me having children. So I because I haven't participated in that part of the dating experience, like with that demographic, I don't actually know. So I don't want to like be too defeatist and say, well, once I do this thing, there's going to be no men available that are going to be like interested in this. But it is more difficult. It is just
definitely, it's a slog.
Yeah.
But it's also a numbers game, right? Like, there are people out there who would be delighted to find you, and they're not everyone. But it is a numbers game. And I do really believe that like, if you go on 37 to 57 dates,
Right.
you will meet someone who feels comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like for me, the numbers game argument feels like very, well, it feels like
Deflating.
It feels deflating. It feels like work. But I would say that I don't want to be with anybody who isn't into it. So all those things are not for me. Like, even if that means that the pool is really small, like I wouldn't want to expand the pool to like people who weren't cool with that. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Okay. So
Definitely.
like I don't need the pool to be bigger just for the pool to be bigger. If it's small, like so be it. Like that's fine.
It should be a select few who are worthy of your hand.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And hearing you talk, it reminded me about the two experiences I had in telling these men I was dating about this. Both of them had very close friend groups themselves. And both of them said after another date that they had gone to their friends and asked them, shared that they had gone on a date with this person that they thought was pretty cool and he was going to have a kid. And what did they think about that? And I thought that was a sign, because that was really their family. They were going to say, like, what do we think about this?
Yeah.
And I saw this great sign that, first of all, they have a fully developed social network that they love and trust and go to. And similarly, I only want someone in my life who's going to understand that, like, Amrita's going to know a lot. And I'm going to go to her and talk to her about the things that are going on in my romantic life. And both of us have a healthy understanding of where the boundary is.
Yeah.
And both of us are very good at respecting other people's boundaries. If someone told me something to not tell anyone, I'm not going to tell Amrita.
Yeah, there needs to be some boundaries to that. Like, even though we've alluded to the fact that now having a kid together brings you into like my dating decisions in a way, at the same time, that there are hard boundaries there.
Not only respecting it, but pushing each other. Like to say, like, you don't need to
share that.
You don't need to share that. You don't need to.
I don't need to know all the details of the date. Sometimes I want to know.
Yeah.
How things went or what y'all did or whatever. But like, I also don't need to know. And also, if you don't want to tell me, I'm never going to push you.
No,
like,
and you never have. We don't
that.
have that
Yeah.
dynamic. Never pushed each other to share when we don't.
Yeah. No, so I did want to return to one thing though, that when Andrew, when you were talking about, you didn't like, one thing that you worry about is having a partner and then having to manage my feelings about you having a partner.
Yes.
And I think part of that just comes from you having to manage my feelings sometimes when like you're dating and I'm not dating, and I feel bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think that's you just carrying that forward, projecting into what that might look like in a, like, you're my co-parent and then you have a partner.
Yeah, you've never made me feel bad about this.
You say that, but I kind of have. Because I think like, women say this a lot to gay men, that it's like, oh, it's so easy for you. Everything's so easy for you.
You have said that. Yeah.
And I think you've, not just me, but I'm sure you've heard that from many of our female friends, that like, oh, it's so easy for you. And in some ways, yeah, it's easier for you. Like, it is easier for you, but that's like kind of an annoying thing to hear. Like, when you're trying to just tell people about the date you went on, or the person you liked, or the person you didn't like, or if you're constantly hearing from your female friends, like, oh, life is so easy for you. It's such a cakewalk to be like a white gay man, like whatever, who looks a certain way. I do think that creates a little bit of that feeling where you're like, oh, I don't want my friend to feel a certain type of way if I'm dating and she's not dating.
Yeah, and I feel that, and I choose actively not to let it change what I tell you. Good. And what I say. And I mean, that's your issue to deal with.
Yeah.
And I'm here and love you to support you through it. But I'm not going to alter what I say to save your feelings when I know that
Yeah,
it's not my
so
place.
I guess I was a little, that's why I wanted to come back to this point, because I was like a little surprised to hear you say like, oh, I do worry about that. I was like, do you?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting to me because it feels like there's an asymmetry in terms of the activity around this topic and an asymmetry in terms of some of the feelings around it. And have you ever considered what it would be like if the opposite were true?
Right. Absolutely.
I think we've
we've
both
actually
been-
talked about this a little bit even now, and thinking about the importance of maintaining our social lives after the child comes, and we have social lives that very much overlap. But even with the people they overlap with, we do things separately with our
Right.
friends. And just because we're going to have a child is still not going to be, I think I can speak for both of us when we say or I'll speak for myself. I look forward to those opportunities for Amrita to go out, whether it's on a date or with her friends or by herself. And I will relish the chance to create that space.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I feel very much like I'm excited for you that you do have some dating prospects right now that are like interesting and fun and like that have been fruitful, because I do think actually that's like a really healthy thing to have going into like a big transition time, because then that does become like an outlet of something that's totally unrelated to home life and that's totally unrelated to baby life, that you can go do that thing, you can go have a date and do that thing, and like that is great. I think that's like a really good thing.
Have you thought about what it would be like? And I think this is really just for you, but maybe for both of you as well. What it would be like if you met someone who was really excited about you and wanted to be the biological parent of your next child?
That is a great question. And this goes a little bit back. I mean, I answered the question that you posed to Andrew about like, I never really thought about having biological children with a romantic partner, like as a nuclear family. So I I can't really envision that scenario. I think it would require a lot of it would engender a lot of conversation. Well, what does the living scenario look like? What's the relationship between our children look like? How do you feel about that? I think then that just becomes one of those scenarios where, again, Andrew, you become much more involved in like a romantic like decision than you might otherwise be involved. I mean, how does that make you feel, like, to think about that?
If we spend enough time, and we have spent time, and we will continue to spend time to talk about what the dynamic of what our relationship is and what makes us feel whole, that is a really exciting thought. Because imagine who that man must be.
A really cool person, probably.
That would be a really cool person to have in your life and our lives.
In our kid's life.
Honestly, if he'd be like really, really great person.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Because it would take a special kind of person, I think, to be to want that or to ask for that.
So it doesn't bother me at all. It's exciting thought.
Love that. Yeah. We have one final big topic to cover in our next episode. Family. What does it mean for two friends to bind our biological families together? What traditions do we want to create or preserve into our new family? It's the sweetest note to round out this special series of episodes. In the meantime, find Marina at marinaweiss.com, and as always, look us up at vjandstevens.com.
I think that, fertility is hot in general.